Hey, good evening, and welcome to our Art and Culture Leadership Conversation sponsored by YubaSutterArts&Culture. My name is David Reed, and this is the second in a series of casual conversations with community leaders on a variety of subjects. Tonight's subject is one that is, of course, near and dear to my heart, art and culture. So YubaSutterArts&Culture likes to carry forward a practice of recognizing the original caretakers of these sacred lands within and throughout the Northern California region. We offer gratitude to these indigenous ancestors and present-day relations of the Maidu and Nisenan tribes of Yuba Sutter. Today, this is also the home of Enterprise Rancheria, Maidu from Oroville, who were displaced by the construction of the dam. We acknowledge their stewardship of these lands over many centuries and uplift their legacies as they continue to build and sustain their culture and practices today. We're honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. Before I introduce you to our star-studded lineup of guests, let's start with some basic dictionary definitions. So art, there's lots of definitions, but let's go with it's the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, often in a visual form such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power, as in the art of the Renaissance. But more broadly, I think art refers to the various branches of creative activity and personal expression, such as painting, music, literature, theater, and dance, as well as the visual arts. Culture includes the arts, but also other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively, like the notion of 20th century popular culture. More broadly, culture includes the customs, the arts, the social institutions, history, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. We want to explore both art and culture individually this evening and maybe find the intersection in the context of our greater Yuba Sutter community. So let's meet our special guests. The panel consists of Vera Correa with the Alliance for Hispanic Advancement. She's a board member, and Candace Young-Fresquez, Bacchae Parade and Festival Committee, Jessica Haugen, Sutter County Museum Director and Curator, Tanya Mack, the Yuba Community College District Director of Grant Research and Development, and also co-founder of The Village, Yuba Sutter. Foster McManus, actor, director, and acting company associate. Susan Miller, co-president of the Sutter Performing Arts Association and retired educator. James Oxner, Sutter County Director of Library Services, and Chris Pedigo, board member of the Mary Aaron Museum and Historic Marysville City Cemetery, and a newly appointed member of the Yuba County Historic Resources Commission. The conversation will be moderated by yours truly, David Reed. I'm Executive Director of Yuba Sutter Arts and Culture. Wow, this is incredible being here with all of you. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's lots of great people out in our community doing a lot around art and culture. So thank you all for being here this evening. So let's have a little icebreaker question. So in your opinion, what do you see as the number one arts and or culture issue in our community or in the nation? Keep your answers short just to get us started. Who's first?
I think money is probably the biggest issue any of us have. I think that with a lot of the reductions in the endowments and grants to different art associations, we've all suffered. I think because that impacts our marketing as well. So people don't know about us, don't know how to reach us, how to interact with us. So I think that focusing on a way to generate more liquid income for all of us is a really important part of it.
I also think access is a big issue. I also agree with you on the resources. The offerings must be there, but in order for those offerings to have a significant impact, people of all ages and from all walks of life must partake in order for growth to really happen. Tapping on resources to enhance participation takes time and additional resources. And I see an access plan as perhaps a next step with all parts of the community involved. And on top of that, a campaign for listening and understanding and developing awareness and tolerance of all the different cultures, not only in our community, but those that are around and about us. And so as an educator, I believe highly that that is entirely possible through education. But again, it's about listening and developing ourselves as individuals to tolerate and come together.
I'm going to take a different spin on this. I think that, yes, money is a big part of it, but we're a very small organization at the Mary Aaron. We have 5 board members, and we are all volunteers. And so the idea that we need that for outreach especially, it's time to join the virtual world. And the Museum of Sutter County has done a good job of that. But the arts, David puts on something almost every week that's to reach the artist and to reach the community. But honestly, I think this is a chance to reintroduce ourselves to our very community at large. I've done a lot of work just trying to branch the museum's ability out there. And right now, I think more so than the money will come, but I think it's time to reintroduce ourselves to the community and what we offer in art and culture.
That is excellent. And I actually piggybacking on that, I think that especially for the Village YubaSutter, we're a relatively new cultural organization. And really it's about opportunity and engagement and partnership. More often than not, we are finding ourselves at resource deficits, right? But braiding funds and certainly working together to reach out to the community that we love and that we all serve is critically important, more so now in this COVID environment, as we kind of are stretching into being virtually affectionate, as I like to call it. But yeah, I
borrow that, Tonya.
Please feel free to steal that. I just think that those strengthening our relationships, opening doors so that we can communicate, and sharing resources will go a long way in really, nurturing the arts and culture in our community.
Vera, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
I'm up there. Is that better?
There you are. You're back. Great.
Okay. I'm going to piggyback on what everybody is saying because it's true. I think we need a little bit of everything that's going on as far as what the funds, the community, but we also need you do a wonderful job, David, of bringing all the arts and the different type of cultures that are around in this area. But I think we need to encourage more different form of the cultures coming together and exposing themselves more again. We used to have a wonderful thing of the Hmongs. I don't see too much of them anymore. I want to see more of the different variety of the cultures that we have here, so their culture doesn't fade away because of the generations that are coming on. So I think we can all do a better job, and I think you do an excellent job, and I want to thank you on that.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on this one?
I think one of the major issues, especially right now, is distraction. I know I've been really distracted and haven't even paid that much attention to David's posts like I should. But I think everybody is kind of, it's such a new world we're faced with, and that maybe we need to figure out a different way to get people's attention. I think if you already maybe have friends or people that you see or family who are interested in the arts and culture, you might have conversations with them and that kind of fills that need, but you kind of then leave out everybody else. So I think some way to just kind of break through that barrier of being distracted with how are we going to move forward.
Yeah, it's almost like two realms. It's here we are in this strange alternate universe, and that's one set of reality. And then there's this thing we're all hoping to get back to, which likely will not be what it was like last year. It'll be some weird hybrid thing, and what's that going to look like? So, we're constantly, the only constant is change, right?
I think if I can piggyback on what everyone else has said a little bit.
I'd like to add a little bit to that of
my screen's freezing.
Oh, we can see you. You're still moving.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So one issue that the museum's been struggling with, and this is not a new issue, it's ongoing and it's industry-wide, but not only serving the audience that has already found us and loves us, but building new audiences and reaching out to new audiences has been a challenge. You know, the newspaper, the Appeal Democrat, has been wonderfully supportive of the museum, and we can always rely on them to share what we're up to. We're active on Facebook. We have our own website. So for the people who are interested in what we're doing, it's really easy to follow along with us. But how do we reach out to those audiences that have not yet learned how much they love us and want to support us and want to engage with us? That's one thing that we're really struggling with. And I see a lot of talk about that, again, industry-wide. And no one seems to have found the magic answer to it yet.
Yes.
I just want to piggyback off what everybody else said, but especially what Jessica just mentioned, opening those doors to those who don't know what our culture is or what we stand behind or what we support, is opening those doors to those who want to know what it is, to bring them in, to bring a new audience. And then for myself would be to bring a new generation of audience. So not just the older generation that's maybe on their way wanting to pass it down, as I see myself as a new generation coming in, but yet there's a whole other generation behind me that isn't even here. And so bringing them back into it, to want to help, to want to be present, to be present in their own community, whether it is their own culture or not, but finding the need in their niche of their community to help.
Fantastic. Good start. So some of you are with well-established arts or cultural organizations. Others are either just starting or in some phase of the development process of nurturing an organization. Talk about your organization's mission and support of art and culture in the community.
Well, I'll start. I'm with the Sutter Performing Arts Association, and we've been really tasked with redeveloping, rehabbing the Sutter Theater. In 2004, two civic-minded individuals bought the Sutter Theater, and after many meetings with the city, with other individuals and agencies, a plan was set forth. Obviously, that took a couple years to do, but we are now seeing an end to the first 2-3 phases of our development. The plan was very simply 3 venues. One, the first one, a black box, which is a large, if you will, multi-purpose room with black walls to decorate as you wish and to have all sorts of events, cultural, artistic, receptions, anything goes, so to speak. The second is the rehab of the lobby and the restrooms, which will include then a snack bar and an adult bar for receptions, small receptions. Obviously, many fundraisers have gone forward. We're now seeing, as I said a little bit earlier, a light at the end of the tunnel in that the black box is completed, relatively completed, and the lobby will hopefully be completed by the first of the year. And that is significant because it's really been on the backs of volunteers, the city, civic-minded individuals have lent time and money, and of course, many fundraising activities, and a partnership with the Yuba Sutter Arts Council. So we want to thank that partnership especially, and as our progress has continued. The third venue, which we haven't started yet, would be the actual performing theater, which is the back half of that large building. It'll be about 299 people, and it will be tiered in a regular theater, small, but a regular theater with some backstage dressing rooms and so forth and so on. So that's a little bit about what we've been doing for the last 10 or 12 years. And again, we're moving forward, and we thank the community for all that they've put forward to help this come forward, because we're now really will be able to see the project unfold and be a crown jewel of the Yuba Sutter area.
I'll go ahead and jump in. I'm from the Mary Aaron Museum, and the house our museum's in was built in 1855, 5 years after the formation of Marysville. The Aarons left us a great building and a great venue. Unfortunately, we're a small organization with a really dedicated team, and really truly our mission, I love the question. The mission is to promote what we have for history here just in the city of Marysville. But since I've become a board member and since I've left public office, the biggest portion of it is sharing the stories that we hold within these four walls, for lack of a better word. We have so many stories about Marysville, Yuba County, even Sutter County for that matter, that need to be told. And that's what we're working on. We're moving into the next century with digital displays. We're rebuilding this museum, which is a city treasure. And the biggest part for me is it's like I don't know how to explain it other than if you've all had an old trunk up in the attic of grandma's house that's full of papers and stories, honest to goodness, that's what the Mary Aaron is. It's an old chest waiting to explode with all these stories. And taking to the next level, Jessica made a comment earlier about trying to reintroduce to the next group of people, and so did Candace. But honestly, I think we've all got to get out there and reintroduce. I mean, my mom, she's in her 60s. She loves hearing the stories, and we passed it on to the next generation. I gave my nieces the story of the Donner Party and a connection to the Aarons. It's about reconnecting with the youth, because honestly, the youth of this community and surrounding communities are really interested if you find the one little niche that you can catch them, that really excites them. And so that's kind of the mission of the museum, is not only to share the history of Marysville, but the history of Yuba County as well. And we're re-energized. And so everybody talks about these vast organizations. We're small, but we're strong. And the thing I really am working on is getting these stories out here, because people love these stories. They love to hear the history of their town. They want to know that half the streets of Marysville or more are named after famous people. And they may not be famous in the sense that they, built a rocket to the moon, but here in our local community, there were giants.
So if I can hop in after, our mission tags right on to what Chris was saying. And I just want to say, Chris, if you guys need help over there, please call me. I would love to help you guys out. So the Sutter County Museum has actually gone through a lot of planning and kind of backup housework and kind of re-examining ourselves and what we do for the community. And part of all of that work was to take a good hard look at our mission statement. And so we actually rewrote it a couple of years ago. And I'm actually going to be a super nerd and read it to you guys, because I want to make sure I get it 100% correctly. But you'll see how it tags right onto what Chris was saying about stories. So our mission statement is: the Sutter County Museum shares local stories to strengthen community bonds, to inspire celebration of our diverse cultural heritage, and to demonstrate how understanding the past prepares us for the future. So there's a lot of elements to unpack in there. And I know we're trying to leave a lot of time for everyone to get their 2 cents in. So I just want to say that I think in our mission statement, we've touched on a number of things that this group has already brought up. And I would love to talk with each one of you individually at a later date about how the museum can be more of a springboard for events and cultural celebrations, and sharing these stories and bringing more people out and together in our community. We're a big property. I have a big building, and I've got a 4-acre park behind me. So we're really well set up to be a host for a lot of different kinds of events. But for me, what it really comes back to as well are those stories. And as part of that re-envisioning of ourselves and our institution, Another thing that we have talked about a lot is the Mary Aaron has great things in their collection and does a lot of great work, but we're really missing in our community something that really is for our region. And one thing I saw immediately when I moved here was that Yuba and Sutter are really, truly one community. It's not two separate groups of people. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I drive back and forth across that bridge every single day. And it really illustrates to me how tied together these two counties are, particularly Yuba City and Marysville, but the counties as a whole. And so one thing we are going to be emphasizing going forward in the museum, and we are working on a plan to redo all of our permanent exhibits. But one thing we're talking about is we're really looking at ourselves as the Yuba Sutter Museum, not the Sutter County Museum, because county boundaries are arbitrary and man-made and don't allow you to tell full stories. And it's the full story that we want to be telling. So, and whatever that means to everyone in the community in terms of partnering, in terms of highlighting different cultural heritage groups, you know, we want to do that. That's where we're at right now.
We want to get out of our individual silos, to your point. There's too much of that. That's more of that collective. I mean, we have our unique mission statement, certainly, but that spirit of collaboration and outreach, taking a more regional approach, I think could have great value for the community. Thank you, Jessica.
Absolutely.
Well,
Anybody
the
else?
acting company has been around since the mid 80s. We started in our current location in 91. Our mission statement is sharing the magic of live theater, which COVID has really challenged us now to come up with new and inventive ways to keep the show on the road, as it were. We're very fortunate to have a wonderful technological wizard, Jeff Graham, who's been streaming several of our productions, mostly our children's theater and a concert that we put on. And so at our Facebook Facebook site, you can get all the information, or our website, you can get more information on how to view these different offerings. Currently, everyone is working on a live outdoor haunted house, which will be the end of October. So at the Vogue Mansion. And that will be from 6:30 to 10, and all that information will be forthcoming. But I think what I'm hearing is that we all have the sharing of stories in common. That's what theater is the sharing of stories, and music is the sharing of stories. So this is a wonderful collaboration. I hope that we can move forward, because I know I've partnered with a couple of you on different things, and it's so important to share our resources. As Chris was saying, the money will come, but if we don't have to continually reinvent the wheel, we're so much luckier. So I'm here, and I welcome your calls.
Okay, I'm going to jump in next. My organization, the Village Yuba Sutter, actually is a organization co-founded by Megan Anderson and I. If you recall, there were several marches that happened in response to the tragic death of Mr. George Floyd. We were proud to have organized those marches and have seen our community, law enforcement, so many people were out, and it was a wonderful vigil and a time of remembrance and honoring his death. But most importantly, it showed that Yuba Sutter comes together, that we're going to stand as one, and that we will not allow what happens in communities around us to happen in our community here. So we were tremendously proud of that. The mission, though, for the Village Yuba Sutter is to amplify the voices, the culture, the education, and health of Black Americans and all marginalized communities. So we are very grassroots and we're very new, but we're powerful. We have enjoyed this robust conversation, and I'll admit it's not always easy conversation, but we've had them, we're nurturing them, we're encouraging them, and we've been received, we've been so well received by the community and folks are really stepping up to help us grow and bring our organization forward. So I'm just thrilled to be here to meet all of you and do hope to connect after this is over.
Good.
We've got lots to share.
Thanks, Tanya.
You're welcome.
I can be next. I'm with the Alliance for Hispanic Advancement. We got together in 1992. There was a group of Latin business people and managers of stores that realized that the local Hispanic people were not being heard. And so they got together and established this organization. And one of their main missions was to have community action, educational enhancement, and economic development. By doing these things, we would partner and get to know what the community needed so we can act as that liaison for the Hispanic people that really don't get involved. As most of you know, most Hispanic people, families, don't interact in politics that much, or they have in the last so many years, but in general, they didn't. They just stayed within their family, la familia. So basically, we just wanted to get out there, be known to the community, be part of the involvement of the community, and give back to the community. So, we all raise money for our organizations, but we also want to give back. So ours is giving back is scholarships, or we help families in situations like that. But we learned a valuable lesson, as all of us know, is we have to partner with other organizations. You cannot grow as an organization if you don't partner with others. And in partnering with others, you understand what their needs are, and you find out that your needs are all alike. Everybody is looking for something to help the community, the people, the culture, and the arts. The arts, especially in the Latin and Hispanic families and countries that are Hispanic, are beautiful. The color, the food, the music. And we are so lucky that we can bring that into this area, and we hope to continue to bring this into this area. Thank you.
We'll talk next week about starting that high school mariachi orchestra.
I know. I'm so excited about that. Yes.
Anyone else care to comment?
Well, I think just quickly, I think one of the centerpiece of our mission is to promote lifelong learning in the community, and so I think we do our best to respond when we see a need, whether it's adult literacy, adult education, or even more recently with all of the students being at home, we were able to get crisis funding from the state libraries. So we took the funding, it was I think $8,000, and we just purchased children's materials, all either electronic books or your regular hardback books, so that there'd just be kind of a boost to our children's collection, and we have seen a huge increase in circulation of those materials. It's just like one of those ways, I think, sometimes to, when you look at crisis funding and it's like, well, what is the crisis? And for us, we just thought it's all these kids at home. So.
I'll be quick. So with the Marysville Buckeye Parade, our mission statement is to preserve the Chinese culture within Marysville. So although this parade started back in 1880 with immigrants from China, that those worked on railroads to bring their culture to the community and have a sense of home, it's definitely developed into something much more of a true community of where we live. And so I'm excited to be a part of that as someone who's young as I am, as I'm told. I don't feel that young, but I'm glad to be a part of it in many ways of just not just the parade, but helping with the temple and the museum that we were able to complete, the arch funding that we have on its way. So there's so much more that I'm excited to bring to the community of Marysville and Yuba City through the art and the culture of the longevity that the Chinese.
Candace, can you clarify for us? I know there's several organizations, and I hope I got your credits correct. I know you're involved in all of it to some extent or another, but the parade, of course, is your primary focus. But what are the different organizations in support of the Chinese American community?
So when it all started, there wasn't an organization other than those who were Chinese that lived in the community, those immigrants. And as time progressed, it became just the Chinese community. They developed their own community. They had a president, a treasurer, a secretary in their own community where they voted. And it carried on within that community, their little circle, to carry on the parade, the temple, and the upkeeping of those things. But as time then progressed into the new age, it became harder. A lot of those individuals became older. They had children, and within our culture, it's a big push to go to college. And once you go to college, most of us don't come home, right? I think I'm very one far and few between that did decide to come home, and I'm glad I did. But when you come home, there's still this home to be at. But those that left, they a lot of them don't look back, and so we are left with this hole that we had to fill. And so that was where the community, not just the Chinese community, but the community in the Yuba Sutter area, decided to help and form the Bacchae Committee. And that's where they became that outreach of getting the volunteers and the donations and the help with Beal and Yuba Sutter Arts and things like that to come together. And so it's developed into much more than just myself. And then we have the Bacchae Parade Committee is one, which organized the majority of the parade and the vendorship on that weekend. And then you have the Bacchae Temple and the Chinese community. And so there are separate entities, about 3. However, well, and let me not forget the sister city, Friends of Bacchae and the sister city. So we all collectively work together to make everything become one. We all work, for the same mission. So it's hard sometimes when we kind of are approached. I don't want to overstep and talk in someone else's realm. But I do appreciate to be able to be here and talk about majority of what I can.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Well, great. Did we cover everybody on that one? Let's touch a little bit on policy, not to turn it into a whole policy thing, but some of us work for private nonprofits, some of us work for government entities. But how do you feel about who does or who should decide arts and or culture policy in a community, and by what methods? Any thoughts on that? It's a little more esoteric. Is there a role for government in that, or?
I think there is a role for government. Go ahead, Foster. I yield the floor to you.
I was just going to say, I think that, with the whole idea of freedom of speech and creativity, it does have a fine line when you're working with a community. We're nonprofit, and we depend upon the kindness of strangers, as Blanche Dubois used to say. So we want to keep everyone on a good footing with us, and so we try with our board and our season committees to always find common ground, something for everyone. But the adage is you can't please everyone all the time, but we do try. And I think for the most part we're pretty successful because we have such a large outreach with children. We're very strict with our children format in that we make sure that it is wholesome and doesn't have any preconceived constraints. But with a lot of theater, that isn't always necessarily true. A lot of times theater is extremely political and extremely slanted in one direction or another, because such is life. So with us, we're very, very careful with our children to make sure that it's straightforward, honest, and they're very well protected and taken care of. We have extremely strict guidelines as far as what goes on in the theater, and to preserve the clarity and the community aspect of our theater. As I said, we have a committee, and it's open to the public to come and be on our committees. All of our auditions are open to the public. but we're very careful with our teaching staff, and everybody's fingerprinted, and we make sure that that's all according to the politics. And I think that that's important as far as government things go. Chris?
Very good. Chris?
I would say that one, government does have a role, but the ultimate decider to me is the community. And since in our side of the house here we deal with history, but history is culture. And history is the community, and it's the fabric, honestly. I mean, there are some stories that we all are privileged to tell that aren't exactly, I guess I would say, they're not always the prettiest story, but they're the story of our community, and it's the truth, and it's what happened. And we have to learn to accept that. But as a community, when it comes to art and culture, that's part of the fabric. You can't hide and sugarcoat everything. History's history. It is what it is. And honestly, I believe in telling the stories the way they happen truthfully. And yes, you have to be sensitive to your audience. But on the other hand, the history of our community and our region is a big fabric, and it's got some stains on it, let's face it. But as far as arts and culture, we have to show that we're still one community, and we all come together and we celebrate our victories and we learn from what's happened. And honest to goodness, we just need to paint the community for what I won't copy anything Vera says, but honestly, we're a community and we need to show it, and it needs to reflect in all of our art and culture. And you're right, Foster, you can't please everybody all the time, but if you tell the story truthfully and the best way it is, it's going to go for the entire community.
Wow, I so agree with that. And I reflect back on a comment that was made earlier about engaging our youth. If we are unable to see ourselves in history, whether it's pretty or not, if we can't see ourselves, how do we see ourselves as we move forward? How do we know where to grow, where to go? I love what you just said, and I so agree with that. And I appreciate you sharing in that way. The truth isn't always pretty, but it's always necessary.
I would offer that the truth would also, as we're trying to speak the truth and the stories and the history, we'll find additional resources, additional partnerships, additional people that can bring back to us and to that organization the riches of what they have. And that's important, and that speaks to community pride and vitality.
Excellent. Anybody else? Let's move on to economics, shall we? So what economic impact do art and culture have on the Yuba-Sutter area? We're going to revisit this in a minute in another context, but literally, what economic impact do you think art and culture have on the Yuba-Sutter area?
I think it's huge. I also, one of my other hats, I'm also one of the board members for the YubaSutter Chamber of Commerce. And when you think about the events that we have in our community that bring people to our community, they spend money when they're here. They stay in hotels when they're here. Tourism is affected when they're here. We get to experience an exchange of culture, information, the richness and the value of that exchange. And it's not always just money, but people coming in and bringing in a fresh perspective and enjoying everything beautiful that our community has to offer. That's big stuff.
Absolutely.
I agree with that, as even though for our big weekend once a year, we kind of hear sometimes, well, it's just a weekend, but the economic impact in the long run is that those individuals are going to see what we have to offer, and knowing that the temple and the community and the museum is here, it doesn't leave, it's there. They're going to come back. They're going to see what's downtown with the Mary Aaron. They're going to see the arts. They're going to see all the other things. There's one will lead to another for those tourists to come back and bring that economic dollar each time they come, whether it's gas or hotels because they spend the weekend and they see that, there's other places they can visit from Yuba-Sutter.
I think we're very lucky to have a big amphitheater here in our close to our area, and that draws in lots of people. And I think if we build up our culture, especially Marysville, because it's so rich in that people would want to see what's going on. And we need to open up better venues in Marysville that is actually honoring our history. So when people come to the amphitheater or if they come to any of these events, they want to see more.
No, agreed. Yeah.
I think too, working away from the tourism angle, we have a gift shop here in the museum, and I try really hard to find craft people and artisans in our local region, or at least in Northern California, that I can buy items from to then sell in our gift shop. So that's supporting local artists and craftspeople. And then the money that is spent in there goes immediately back into what the museum is able to offer our community. We use those funds to bring in traveling exhibits and put on educational programs. And so, and then at an opposite end of the spectrum, sort of, we started a farmer's market here in the spring, which brings direct dollars to local farmers and eventually more craftspeople, et cetera, as we're allowed to grow the market into what I originally envisioned it to be. But so the arts and culture has an immediate, very local impact on top of the tourism impact of it, which I am not negating at all. I 100% agree that the tourism aspect of it is huge and could be way bigger for this community if we do learn how to package it a little more. And Chris, no offense, I love Marysville, and I actually live in downtown Marysville as well, but could use a little bit of a facelift as well. If we all work together to get all this stuff organized and to offer just a little bit more to those tourists and to our local community, I think the effects of that would be astronomical.
The Sutter Theater. The Sutter Theater folks really are expecting an impact on Plumas Street once the theater is up and running. With the redevelopment of Plumas Street and the work on the theater, we see it as a nice knit, if you will, for an economic boon in that particular area, which reaches out to the hotels and the eateries and the gift shops in the area.
Absolutely.
And as far as economics, I think the ability to draw tourists to Marysville, which is a vast, rich history. You're correct. I don't disagree with you. I have, in my time here, I picked my camera up in 2010 after a long time not having it. And I've tried to highlight every single event I could get to show the outside world and the people of our community how much they really, truly miss out on. I'm not of the notion to believe that nothing ever happens here, because we have one of the busiest communities you'll ever live in. And we have some of the richest history. And it doesn't matter to me what side of the river it's on. We have so much history here. And I've traveled to a lot of different places. And many of you know I'm a cemetery person too. I've traveled to some of these magical places, and we have just as much of that magic here. And you're right, we do have to show it off a little better. But this community has so much magic, and the economic benefits of that are, I don't think you can set a limit on it.
One thing that I found very interesting when I was with Lead Sutter was how much impact the arts and creative events within a community weight the different demographics when professionals and or businesses want to come into the area. Each one of our collective entities adds so much value to our community. And I think it's, as you've all said, it's so incumbent upon us to get the information out so that more of our own folks know what is going on. I can't tell you how many people say to me, I had no idea the theater was here. And we've been here a long time. Yeah. But I mean, and these are lifelong, residents that don't know what's going on. And so I think our major issue, our major problem probably is marketing.
I think you're absolutely right.
I hear that same thing all the time.
And that's one of my, it's not a pet peeve, it's just a goal, an aspiration to make local residents more aware of what's here. I live in Plumas Lake, 90% of the people I talk to in Plumas Lake don't have a clue what's going on in Marysville, let alone Yuba City. They all go to Sacramento or Roseville. And they don't think anything about driving 35, 40 minutes. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. I like it too, but they don't have any sense of what's just to the north. So
Exactly. Yeah.
marketing, you're right. So yeah, making a cultural tourism play here with our collective efforts, I think, would be something to put on our wish list.
Right. I think our leaders often are looking to attract businesses and attract people to move to the area, real estate. And if you don't have anything to show them, then they're not going to be interested. I think it's important when people are thinking about moving to community, they're going to say, well, what does the arts and culture look like? If you can show them, look at the museum, look at these groups that are meeting, look at the theater, look at the library, especially the library, and they'll, are we actually being promoted in that way? And if we are, that goes back to what I think Jessica and Chris were saying. We need it to look good. We need to maintain these things. We need to have them presentable so that when people do come and look, they see something that they say they want to be a part of that.
Well, those are those quality of life issues that are so critical to folks that, as you said, might be considering relocating for a job opportunity. And having watched the community the election forums last week for both Sutter County, Yuba City, Marysville, and Yuba County, there was not one mention of anything related to arts and culture in this community that any of the candidates or incumbents mentioned, several of whom are on our board of directors. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we're not, are we more important than flood control or fire and police? No, but at least there's a place somewhere in that conversation about the community and, again, quality of life issues that should be considered in those conversations. So.
Can I, David, really quickly?
Please.
I don't mean to hog the conversation. I just want, to James' point, I was one of those young people looking to move here 5 years ago, almost on the spot. And a lot of you have probably heard me say this already, but when I was looking at moving here, I did what we're all talking about. I Googled the area to see what there was and what I was getting myself into. And you know what every single website I went to said? And it was chamber and city and county, like everything I found, every website said, we're a great place to move to because houses are cheaper than the rest of California and we're really close to the Bay Area and Tahoe and the coast. I didn't find a single thing on any of those websites about arts and culture in this area or what there was that I would actually want to engage with in our own community. Now, of course, I did some more Googling and did find some of the organizations, but the fact that I couldn't find anything on any of those websites, which are really the first place a lot of people are going to be looking when they're trying to check out a community. So, when we talk about marketing, when we talk about packaging, and we talk about, bringing in businesses and bringing in younger people to this community, that's a big part of the problem why we're not able to do that right there is that, if people can't find the information in a really quick search of a couple of top information sources, they're going to stop looking. So I don't have an answer to this. I just wanted to share my own personal story as one of those people who did, and obviously I moved here anyway. Right. Because I think the museum's a gem.
You did.
I was trying to get back to the West Coast, but it is a big problem around here. People do tend to focus on the areas around us and what we're close to and not what is here that makes this community great.
Great case in point. All right, here's another one that I know is important to all of us. So how important is arts in education? Is there a positive effect on the local youth? And if so, what is it? Kind of a loaded question, but I'm curious to hear your various responses to that loaded question. Who's first? I'll start. It's the absolute number one priority for Yuba Sutter Arts and Culture, along with just general engagement for arts and culture in the community. It's our biggest portfolio. all the different programs we have that we're now converting to virtual formats with Poetry Out Loud, Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, of course, with Jessica's collaboration, Jump Starts, where we're working with arts programs for system engaged or other at-risk youth in juvenile hall and the alternative high schools, field trips that we're now going to turn into virtual guided tours of some art galleries for art students with funding we've already received. And we can't take kids to LA like we did in January, but we can certainly do something. So we're very keen on arts and education. I'm sure many of you have seen the studies that they're just as important as any other field of study in terms of shaping young, impressionable minds and creating whole individuals, whether they pursue science or art or whatever in their history as a field of study. So
I'll piggyback on that. David, as a former educator, we all know that young children learn best by doing. And so if their hands are busy, their minds are creative. And that leads them to find avenues that they enjoy, skills they didn't realize they had. I think a form of art also teaches a person patience, perseverance, learning the joy that can come out and the rewards. Often it's also a form of expression. And I also think about the adolescents and the teenagers in that they're often misunderstood, or they themselves feel that nobody is listening and understanding. And that can come out in their art, whatever form they choose. But having access to that is so very, very important. And I go back to that access word again, in that it can't just be an after-school activity. It can't be just for the kids that are excelling because they have extra time. It has to be for all. We think of athletics as keeping kids off the street, keeping them out of trouble. We've often heard how athletics really turns a kid on for school, keeps them in school. The arts can do that as well. And I truly believe that everybody can find a little bit of a niche that will help them in self-expression when times are tough and when times are good.
great.
I totally agree with you on that. After watching 30 years of 3 generations of children coming through, teenagers coming through, grown up, adults coming through the theater, how people grow and blossom and bloom and develop such a sense of self and such a sense of accomplishment. Because of course the number one fear is public speaking. So, being in a play is public speaking, but you get to do it as someone else. So it really, I think, helps everyone develop more of themselves. I'm fortunate enough that my son latched on to theater. It probably saved his life. It kept him occupied, because when you have to memorize a script, you cannot be fooling around with stuff. And he didn't. And he is now continuing on as a professional and really has made an amazing life for himself. Also, as a graphic artist, he's able to express himself. And as a physician, I know how important it is to develop both sides of the brain. As you were saying, children develop as they do. Well, stimulating both sides of the brain allows us to really develop our brains as critical thinking machines, and allows us so much breadth and depth of topic when we understand so much more. Because standing in front of a painting or listening to a poem or hearing a song, watching a theatrical performance can evoke such emotion from us. And I was interested to know that laughing is not natural. Laughing has to be taught. So in that, many more of our emotions, being able to experience them are themselves a teaching aid. So there you are. I think it's very important.
Excellent.
Okay. A lot of people probably don't know, Foster does, that I did 30 years of working in the theater at Yuba College. and I was backstage, and she said
Wow.
exactly what yeah,
I have no
exactly what
idea.
I know most people don't. I actually
Hmm.
work with Dave Wheeler,
Yeah, see,
fabulous.
yeah.
But one of the things is exactly what Foster is saying. You take these kids that normally are not your best behaved children, kids, and you're talking teenagers, and all of a sudden they bloom on that stage. They have commitment, and anybody that does theater or does anything culturally that has to do with long-term showmanship, it takes time, it takes commitment, it takes yourself being ready to do the job that you're asked to do. I personally think that we need to go back and maybe put more emphasis in the school system to bring back the arts stronger. And I know it's about money, but I think somehow with things going on, I think we are creative enough and that we can ask whether it's the government, whether it's the cities, whether it's the counties, to bring back money into the arts at a school level. So when they have at least a base. I mean, we can't just do it individually. It has to start back again from us receiving money and back into the schools. That's just my interpretation.
Here, here.
I definitely agree that arts in our education, not just in our own community, is very important. I see it in my own two kids. They play piano and violin, and that in itself is their arts that they are able to express. And even just through this whole time we've been home, they've discovered finding art projects through YouTube. And so they've become very creative, and it's very nice that they've been able to create that outlet.
Wow.
But then it makes me think about those children who may not have that outlet in their own homes, you know, and that our schools don't always have that outlet to give every day, whether it's once a week or twice a week. So I think there's so much positive reinforcement behind that for those kids that may not have the exposure to it at home. They get it at school, and they may find that niche that they enjoy, whether it's music, whether it's dance, whether it's, you know, being creative with paper or whatever it may be within the realm of arts. It's so important to have that mindset that they can do anything, even if education isn't their strong suit. They can go to school and find a way in arts and still make it through their day. So I would love to see it incorporated back into education as a daily or at least weekly part of their curriculum. I know my kids enjoy it, and I love watching them excel through it.
Good. Wonderful.
You know, if I could, one really quick comment. I know that when you think about code switching and the development of language, sound, music, and rhythm with urban youth or youth who align themselves with urban culture, there is a partnership, there is a belonging, there is a reaching into their lives, their brains, their minds, how they look at the world, how they look at themselves, and how they relate to one another through the use of spoken word or rap or how they use music. I think that it's so critically important when we are, our children are frequently in public education systems that reward the use of certain language styles, the use of certain academic learning modalities, and then you take this same kid and you drop them into something that lets them recognize themselves and the culture that they find value in, and all of a sudden they bloom. I think that's art.
Beautiful.
I'm gonna jump in because it's something nobody's touched on yet, and it's personal to me. Is literature and the library. James's library I grew up in every day. That was the outlet I had, whether it was literature or reading or the programming. But the one thing we've done in this digital age, and we've all done this tonight, and I'll be the first to tell you I do too, we want to stream everything live, but there's nothing better to me than the magic of a book. And I'm a book person. I have a pretty good sized collection. But when I was a kid, that was the only opportunity I had, was the library. So whether it was reading poetry or reading history or anything I could get my hands on, it made me the person I am today, or one aspect of it, because I love literature and I love reading and all the things associated with. So the magic of art is great. And I'm not a musician, but there are kids that excel, and the arts and education program in our schools have been cut to the bone, and it's usually the first thing they cut, let's face it. And so you're right, Tanya, that it's what brings the child to the art. It's not the art we give them. So many times we have people that, well, this is the box that art lives in. No, it's not the art that the box lives in. The art's out there in the world. You just happen to open your eyes. And if it's rap that brings the child to art, or whether it's literature, which I love, it's not about us to put art in a box. And I don't think any of us really truly do, but sometimes it happens. You have to expand your mind. And the Arts Council has put on a great program that encompasses all kinds of arts and forms of art, whether it's music. And to me, it's the whole package, bringing everything to the schools.
I was pleased to see a post today on, I think, Facebook for the Wheatland School District. They just got a $500,000 grant to reinforce some of their programs. And I haven't read the fine print, so I don't know what all it encompasses, but there was a whole sentence about art education. So it was STEAM, not STEM. And so I've got to dig in a little deeper and talk to Mr. Olson and Nicole Newman out there to see what exactly they'll be doing. And we're often overlooked, or can sometimes be overlooked, but for other budgetary considerations. So, anybody else on arts and education for now, or?
I just want to
Please
make sure and remind everybody that we have a lot of acting classes at the acting company. So if the children are not getting it right now because of COVID, check our website and our Facebook pages, because they're there.
Excellent.
And we're here for
Excellent.
them.
I just want to kind of gloss over the next question. We sort of touched on it earlier, but I just wanted to point out, I read an interesting statistic the other day. With the art and entertainment apparently employs over 41% of all self-employed workers, and over 16% of all workers, period, in the state of California. 41% of all self-employed workers. So those are independent artists, like many of the muralists we work with. And even beyond that, 16% of all workers in the state of California are involved in somehow in art and entertainment. And that's a statistic from a Creative Economy report published by the Otis College of Art and Design. Very comprehensive document, covers the whole state. But the question was, do you think the arts should be a priority for educators? Obviously, that's a yes. Policymakers and government leaders in YubaSutter. So if anybody wanted to specifically address more of that issue, feel free, or we can move on.
Well, I think it's incumbent upon us to remember that historically, creatives have always had benefactors. And we don't have those people in place so much anymore. We're very fortunate at the acting company. We have some wonderful folks, and we do get a lot of, as I said, we depend upon the kindness of strangers. So we're pretty much, our ticket receipts and our donations. But I think that having more endowment programs and making it easier to donate and get tax breaks would be really important. I think we'd get more money, loosen up a little bit more money, and having it be a part of stimulating growth in the arts and supporting these folks that, I mean, it really hit New York hard. As I said, my son is a professional artist, and it's been a tough one this season.
Not a lot of auditions going on for real theater right now, huh?
No, but they're getting very creative.
As are we all. All right, we're good on that one.
Can I just weigh in really briefly?
No,
sorry. And I just want to apologize to all of my fellow panel members here. We're wrapping up the farmers market, and I've got someone taking care of most of it. But if I disappear from my screen for a minute or two, it's because I needed to handle something for that. So I just wanted to say, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, that I think absolutely the arts should be a priority for policymakers and government leaders around here, and I don't think they are. I get a lot of positive feedback from our elected officials around here about what we're doing at the museum, but God forbid I ask for more money, So, but I think it is part of the quality of life issues we've brought up, and the fact that they all continue to talk about wanting to attract new businesses here and attract more of our college educated younger folks who have left to go to college to come back, and the arts and culture is integral to doing all those things, but somehow they just don't seem to make that connection. So I just wanted to throw that out there really
We're
quick
going to keep
before we
working
moved
on
on.
We want to be part of the conversation. So, all right. So here's I think a very important topic for all of us. What role do art and culture play in the struggles for justice and social change? Oh boy, who's first?
Okay, I'll step in.
Well,
I think
okay, go ahead.
historically, it goes all the way back to the fact that in the beginning we had jesters. They talked to the king. They were able to say whatever they wanted to, and a lot of times the art, the song, is the voice of the protest. It helps to sway public opinion. Public opinion then starts to make changes in the laws. And we have so much history in that. And now, you look at from what, Hamilton, Fiddler on the Roof, all of these wonderful musicals, literature that goes on and on about the struggles. So yeah, we are the accompaniment, if you will. The arts are the accompaniment to the progress that we make as a society.
I like the jester analogy. I'm thinking of all those smart alecky jesters in Shakespeare and
Yes.
getting away with murder.
Well, and you remember too that Botticelli painted all of the politicians into his street
In
scene.
the paintings, right? Not always in the most flattering light, as I
No. Which was a statement, I think, as all art is, political art is. But even, how do we know? Historically, we look back and think, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. And then you learn the story of the painting or the song or the poem, or was that story really true? Yeah. It is our history.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I think it also, when I think about the role, I liken it to language, right? So if all of us, and I'm going to make an assumption, if all of us were just swooped up right now and dropped in the middle of Greece on the island of Heraklion, we would have no idea what was going on. We would depend on one another because we speak the same language, but we'd be viewing something entirely foreign and different to us, to our culture as Americans and what we know. I think that art, in that respect, I think that art takes us to another place, and it invites you to learn, to listen, and to have an experience with me, right? It says to me, this may not be your reality, but it is mine. And I invite you to share this experience and have an exchange with me. And as that relates specifically to justice and social change, I think it's a very timely question, and it takes us to where we are right now today. We're all looking for that concentric circle that says, this is what I know, this is what you know, and somewhere in between, I want to open myself up to learn it, to experience it, and to receive it. I don't have to agree, but I can respect it, and if you'll take me with you, I'll hear it, right? And I think that that's kind of where art lives. It's that voice, it's that language, it's that visual imagery, it's that thing that can transport us together to a new place to do a new thing.
I totally agree with that. I would offer that if in today's day, with what we're dealing with, COVID, the pandemic, the racial injustice, the isolation that we're all feeling. And we think about the youth and how they're struggling with all of that. If we were to go back in a year or two and examine some of the artifacts of their pictures, their art, their music, drawings, whatever, what have you, even quilts that people make, pull everybody in, I bet we would have quite an array of stories to learn from and yet to be told. And I would also offer that the children of the first responders would also have quite a few stories, as their lives have been turned upside down, and in some cases worried whether their family's going to be intact. So it's a sobering comment and thought, but we learn from the arts. We learn justice and injustices in order for us to be a better citizenry.
One of the things I wrote was one word: expression. And when I read this, I thought of graffiti. I love graffiti. Not in my house, but I love graffiti because it just really shows expression, whether it's anger, whether it's love, whether what's going on. You might not understand it because it's that person's mind, but graffiti has been around for as long as we know. And graffiti can be the most beautiful color scheme and the beautiful messages. You just have to stop and think and look at it enough. I even look at railroad cars going by and I look at all the graffiti and I'm trying to figure out who they are, what they are. But graffiti really does show people's injustice, people's wanting to be heard. And this is normally a culture that is unheard because it was done in those barrios. And to me, I just love graffiti, and now it's very expensive.
I'd agree with you, Vera, and I think it should be also pointed out. I mean, that's something that people can look to and be inspired by that. But I think also some of the work that the YubaSutter Arts has done with murals and with painting on the utility boxes.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people who live on the streets, and why shouldn't they, as they're out there, have something to look at and to enjoy and to, it's kind of interesting when you think about how many people every socioeconomic level sees those and can enjoy them. And it's almost a shared experience, whether these people know each other or not.
I never thought of it from that perspective, James. They've been very popular, but the murals and the utility boxes, we kind of look at them as our outdoor art gallery. And but that perspective that folks that might not otherwise encounter art in any way, shape, or form encounter those pieces and hopefully smile and take a closer look. So thank you for that.
Can I, from the culture side of the question, from the history institution side, this is a really interesting question. Historically, museums have been sort of looked at as a neutral space. There's been a really big shift in the industry in the last, I'm going to say really 5 years, but 5 to 10 years of a lot of particularly younger museum professionals, but just a better understanding across the field that museums are not neutral. They never have been. They can't be. If you think about the way we're set up as institutions, there are people in positions of power in the institution. They decide what pieces are collected and how, and they decide what is displayed and what stories we tell. So what kind of stories do you think those are? Are those neutral? No. There's a lot of work being done now to go back and look at those stories from a more inclusive perspective and include as much as possible, when possible, include the people that we're talking about in our exhibitry in the process of creating that exhibitry. So it shouldn't be me as the curator of the museum telling the story. It should be me working with the people whose story it is to tell it in the museum setting. And that way we make sure that it is factually correct, that it is authentic, that it is something that everyone can feel proud of and feel proud of sharing with their community. And how that all relates to struggles for justice and social change in my brain is obvious, but probably not to people who aren't real museum goers. But a great example for me and my institution here, this is something that's happening industry-wide, but I should say, particularly in California, it seems the museum field is really becoming a leader in this. So we had an exhibit on the Nisenan Maidu, the Native Americans who have historically lived in this area. And it was a very dated exhibit. It was very old. It had been there since sometime in the 1980s. And being a small institution, we don't always get to keep up with updating our exhibits as much as we should. But fast forward to a few years ago, we had some tribal representatives in the museum. And after going on a tour and seeing all of our exhibitry, they looked at that exhibit and they told me frankly and straight up, they said, most of the material we have on display here is sensitive material and we would rather not have it on display. And I said, I'm sorry, I had no idea. And we took it all off display the next day. Because I think that is the appropriate and correct way to respond in a situation like that. That's their culture that we're putting on display. So I want to make sure it's done in a way that's sensitive to their needs and that we're telling the story appropriately. So what we did after that was we created a network of tribal representatives in the region, and we worked with them to create a brand new exhibit showing brand new artifacts that were made for that exhibit, but also bigger than the artifacts, we talked honestly about their history in this area. We used words like genocide without worrying about the fact that we may and probably have offended some of our more traditional visitors. Because again, museums are not a neutral space. So we need to take a step back and look at the perspective that we're telling our stories from, and who gets to choose those stories and why and how, and really reimagine what that should be to be creating a space that's for all members of our community. And that's really my goal with our museum. And I'm talking about my own institution a lot, but that's what we do, right? So for me, I think the arts and culture play a huge role. We share the stories. Our mission statement talks about sharing our stories of the past to better prepare us for the future. If we don't know what's happened in the past, how can we do better? So I think we have a really big role to play.
Wonderful.
In my mind, and I'll make it brief, but as I sat and listened to everyone, I thought of the great tapestry, the Battle of Hastings. History is the writing. Art is the song. And the song we all sing, we all want to be positive, but you have to share the whole story, not just the pared down version. And this museum in both these Yuba and Sutter County, as a cemetery and as a museum person, all of these people have a story, and you need to tell it the way it happened. And sometimes when those two meet in the middle, sometimes the story isn't the most pleasant, but we also have to remember sometimes, and I think we forget this, you can't apply 2020 vision to 1850 happenings. You have to look at them in perspective. And I think Jessica's right. It's how the museum keeps in mind it's the perspective of the times, not today's perspective or our particular perspective. It's using art and culture to paint the picture how it really happened.
Very good. Anyone else? This one is, we've touched on a little bit, but I'd like to delve a little deeper. So what can we do as arts and culture leaders to ensure access, social equity, and inclusiveness for all of our respective arts and culture programs in order to engage the entire community? Any thoughts on that? This is something the California Arts Council is working with all of their local affiliates like YubaSutterArts&Culture. The whole issues of equity and inclusiveness are so vital, and we're working hard to figure out ways to ourselves to to reach into other aspects of the community that maybe we haven't provided relevant programming or events. Having one big cultural festival is fine and fun, but maybe there's some other things that we need to do. So we're not reinventing ourselves, but certainly trying to think out of the box to find new ways to ensure that access and inclusiveness.
David, I think it's really important, as Jessica said, to listen to those that are acutely involved. I think right now with our social injustice that we're experiencing in this country right now, messages of inclusion are very important. They're a beginning, but I think more and more dialogues and conversations like the ones we're having right now are vital. And I think that as thought leaders or as people who are working with these amazing organizations that we are all associated with, to really find a common thread and a common ground and really elaborate on the areas where we're not so familiar, where we don't know exactly what the other is feeling, to make it much more equitable across the board, to really listen. I think listening, as we were talking about earlier, is so important because listening allows us to assimilate the other person's perspective. And if we're talking, I always tell this to my actors, if you're talking when I'm talking, you're not listening. So to listen is to really be one with that person. And I think that is probably the most important. Anybody who has any kind of authority anywhere should take on as a primary, what is it that Spock is always saying, the primary directive is to listen.
Yes. Yes. Anyone else? I feel like I'm playing Stump the Stars here.
I've been trying not to talk too much, but I think this is something that conversations like this can start, as everyone's been saying, and partnering more between our institutions. We have our audience that's followed the museum for years and will come to everything that I organize. I know there are people who go to the library who have never once stepped foot inside the museum. And the same with some of your other organizations. So I think this conversation right here could be a really good starting point to open our institutions up to more equity and inclusiveness.
Engaging people that aren't always in the arts per se, church leaders, not to say they aren't, but let's just throw that out there. Church leaders, the different associations, leaders, even the participants in those associations, high schoolers in the different ethnic clubs will give us a wide array of perspectives. The conversations may be hard, they may be difficult, but they need to start to happen so that, again, we can not only find common ground, but open our own perspectives and learn from each other. It just is so very, very important that we listen, we observe, we participate with sincerity. It can't be condescending and I've got 15 minutes, so will you talk to me? It's got to be thoughtful, purposeful, and meaningful for both. And it's almost like one-to-one, and then people can come together and begin to put notes and so forth. It sounds a little simple, but in the end, I think it is, again, it takes time, patience. I think in the end, it's very worthwhile. Engage the people that are not engaged in our comfort circles.
I couldn't agree with that more. I had a conversation with a colleague earlier today around this exact topic. And what I advised her is that when you go into a room where decisions are being made, you need to look around and see who's not at the table, because that means the right people aren't in the room. That means that we have not been inclusive in our decision making. So I think that as we think about how do we include people, Unfortunately, people of color traditionally are included after the fact in our community. So we look around and everyone's talking, and this has happened to me personally. And I am a leader in the community. I can walk into a room and I won't know anyone sitting at the table, and everyone's having conversation about their kid's soccer team or who they went golfing with, or it's the same folks. Or if I'm doing grant research and I'm looking at boards of directors, I promise you, I see the same names on every single board in the community. When I go to events socially in the community, I see the same faces. So when decisions are being made that directly affect the community that we serve, I feel they're being made by the same people over and over again. We need to ensure that we are not making decisions on behalf of the community of color. We need to work within the community of color, amplify the voices of those who are already doing the work. Some of those organizers, like myself, may be grassroots, but that means that I know and I have reached out and touched the voices, the people, the lives, the culture that you're trying to help. So please, I think that that's the first step. It's looking around and saying, hey, wait a second. Did we ask them? Did we do a focus group? Did we open this up so that the voices of those that we really desperately want to serve are truly being heard? And far too frequently, that does not happen. And I also think that tapping into a younger generation, that is critically important. And when they show up, be accepting of how they show up. We cannot expect young people to walk in the room like those of us in the 50+ crowd. They're going to use a language that may not be what we're used to hearing. Their pants may not be quite pulled up all the way. Their hair color may not be that we would choose. Their fingernails might be different. You know, we're going to see these differences that are reflections of who they represent in the community. But we have to be ready to have those conversations and to open ourselves up enough to receive. We can't keep continuing with doing business as usual. We really have to press pause and make sure that we're being inclusive as we plan, because that is the planning process. And that is the process of inclusion.
Absolutely.
So,
I'm going to jump in on the
We're close.
Go ahead.
So if I could ask anyone else that wants to comment, please do, and try to keep it a little brief because I've got one wrap-up question for us.
Okay, I just want to say something.
I'll be really short.
Chris,
Go ahead, Vera.
Just
You
real
have
brief.
Vera, then
One of
Chris.
Okay, one of the things that we realized as a Hispanic organization is if we didn't partner and go into boards to sit in boards, we couldn't make decisions. And that was one of the things we found out is we have to go to these places and say, hey, do you have any Hispanics here? Or how can we let you know what's going on? We had to start putting people out on boards. We had to start working our way into the political. And I don't mean because we're nonprofit, but knowing who makes decisions. When you know who makes decisions, then you can be clear and give them your voice. And that's what I think we need to do is voice ourselves and hear the other people's voices. Like Foster says, we need to listen and listen well and learn.
Chris?
Thank you, Vera. As having been a former elected official, I can say this, and we didn't all do the best job, but I'll make it short and sweet. We sometimes, as a collective group, elected officials, and as former one, I can say this, and I'll probably catch it for it, but it's okay. We don't bring young people in to listen to them. We bring them in to pacify them. We can bring them in and we listen, but we're really not listening sometimes. And I won't speak this to me personally because I pride myself on listening. But what happens is we bring them in, we listen, but then we tell them what we think. And then when they leave the room, decisions are made and maybe the input isn't taken. And you're right, we should listen more and accept what they have to say because they are the future and we won't be here.
You're here.
If I could just say one thing, and I'll
Candace,
keep
yeah.
it short, David. I think our key word would be just pure outreach. I think that sometimes we get stuck in our own realms of what we back in our and when what we support within our arts and our own cultures, and that we forget that we have such a vast community that we truly can outreach, like Jessica had said, to collaborate and outreach to those. I know there's things that I may not outreach to foster with the acting company that we could foster something with the Chinese, a play of some sort, and those things. And I think that's something that we forget, that we are a community, whether it's a bridge or not a bridge, and that this is truly an outreach and to our own communities that we forget about. So I think that's something even ourselves can definitely
great
work
point.
with
I think we
and
need to
work
get
on.
much more tactical in our marketing and thinking outside the box, just like that. There's a great takeaway right there. We'll work on it.
Definitely.
90 minutes gone just like that. Amazing, isn't it? This has been fabulous. Let's, if I may, we have 20 more questions, but we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up with one that I think might be kind of fun. So what would you suggest are we most missing in Yuba Sutter in terms of arts and culture? In other words, what's on your wish list for art and culture in our community?
If I could kind of jump in, since the parade for Bacchae and the temple, everything is so geared to Marysville. The key word is Marysville. And I feel like sometimes those in Yuba City, I live in Yuba City. A lot of people who live in Yuba City have been lifelong residents of like,
Really?
what are you talking about? I've never been there. So I think it's that, again, outreach to our neighboring communities and neighboring neighborhoods to share what we all have. And it's not just inclusive to Marysville because you live in Marysville or you're from Marysville. It's everybody is included to participate. It's a true community. And I think that's just in our culture, in our art, that it's not just because it's a bridge, whether it's, the 10th Street Bridge or the 5th Street Bridge or the East Street Bridge, we're all connected some way or another. And that it's okay to cross those bridges and come together. And I feel like that's what we're missing, that just because there's a bridge, you feel like you can't cross it and it's not a part of your art or your culture.
Anybody else with a wish list for arts and culture in Yuba Sutter?
Well, I think I'll just piggyback on that and say that I think all of us here would agree that if we partnered with one another, we would be far richer as an organization. And I think that thank you very much, David, for the opportunity of participating with you and with all of you. I feel that my organization is very fortunate to be in among you, and I know that I speak for the board of directors when I say we are open for business, but COVID has kept us. But we're open to participate and ideas and be a part of our community as much as possible. So I'm happy to be among this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with a wish list for Yuba Sutter Arts and Culture?
So there's just a couple of things, and I could wrap it up fairly quickly. I really would love to see more inclusion for the community of color. And when I say inclusion, I mean not in the buzzword type of a way, oh, we're inclusive, not that, not weaponizing brown faces and white spaces because now you can say, the Black girl or the Black guy or the Latina is in the room, so now we're inclusive. But what I'm really hoping for is true partnership at the core root level of what we develop together. So when we as separate organizations are moving something forward, strategy forward, our strategic planning retreats, please reach out and think about who could be part of that process to offer perspective and a lens that doesn't exist currently within your organization. Even if it's just inviting them in as a guest for a portion of what you do. That's a way that you can truly be inclusive and really hear from those who represent the community of color. And I offer myself and my partner up with the Village Yuba Sutter to help be the bridge into those spaces, we're happy to do it. So thank you, David, for this time with you and with everyone on the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank
We'll
you.
be talking more, Tanya. Anybody else before we wrap up?
I'll be really brief. I think that partnerships and just knocking down these age-old barriers that we've all seen in the community, and all working together and being good partners and being in, we can throw the word being inclusive around, but if we're all good partners, we're all at the table, we're all there, and we're all helping make the decisions. We're showcasing what the acting company has, what YubaSutterArts has, what the museums and every organization in our community adds a little piece to that rich fabric that I talked about earlier. And it's going to paint that picture that, wow, this is a community that's together. It's a community that's moving forward. And honestly, we're a community that loves each other, and we all do want to work together. And I'm just nice to see these conversations because it knocks down some of the age-old barriers that we all face and have all heard about.
I've also appreciated the conversations and believe the one word inclusivity is certainly the piece that echoes. The last few minutes of this conversation have really garnered that. When we are inclusive, it builds community pride and it builds more productive ideas and commitments. And I think that would be the next steps.
Somewhere down the road, I would like to see where all of us that are wanting to do more with the arts, the music, the theater, everything is be under one umbrella for PR. I think that's where we miss it sometimes, is we're all trying to do our thing and everybody's doing their own PR, and it takes time, and some are better at it than others. I think somewhere down the road we need to put our thinking caps and join together and be under one umbrella, and all our members, all our people that we have on our list, let's put it out and share it to everybody.
Let's continue that thought and that conversation, Vera. We had a little bit of that a few years ago at Yuba College when Teresa Aronson was still there. We tried to get a kind of a YubaSutter Art and Culture Consortium going, and maybe we bring something like that back. To your point, I think that would be a very powerful vehicle for all of us too.
I think the Lodging Association and their Visit Sutter initiative would be the perfect funding source for that
and,
too.
Have you all seen the Visit Yuba Sutter guide that they produced? It was a good beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good beginning. So take a look if you haven't seen it. I think it's available online as well. So we want to amp up the arts and culture component.
If anyone needs one of those, I have a box full of them here at the museum. I'm happy to mail them around to people, or you could come to our farmers market on Wednesday afternoons from 4 to 7 and pick one up.
Such a great pitch, woman. I love it. All right, everybody, we have to wrap it up here, I think. Just want to thank our incredible panelists this evening for being so generous with your time and for sharing all these wonderful insights. I know we'll be talking about this for a long time to come. Thank you for your ongoing work on behalf of the community. I look forward to continuing to work with each and every one of you as we work together to build even more of an arts and culture infrastructure in Sutter and Yuba counties, something we can all continue to be proud of. Plenty of room for growth and expansion and lots of new opportunities as we've explored on this call this evening. Thanks to our audience for joining us live for this fabulous conversation. Remember, you can tell your friends to watch either on Yuba Sutter Arts and Culture's Facebook page or on YouTube. Go to our YouTube channel, Yuba Sutter Arts, and catch the replay for this and our many other programs. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the rest of the Yuba Sutter Arts and Culture team. Excuse me, Abby Cecina, Sue Grau, and Shantae Arroyo, who's been driving the bus behind us all here with the wonderful titles and keeping us looking very professional. So we appreciate all of you. And again, thanks everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.